This is Betsy Jensen, and you are listening to Unstoppable Body and Mind, episode 72, Acceptance and Healing. In this podcast, we learn to upgrade our brain and understand the power of our thoughts, to heal and to create the results we want in our life. Become the person in control of your healing and make peace with your life. Become unstoppable, body and mind. Hello, my loves. Today, I'm going to talk about the concept of acceptance. And if you've had chronic pain, you may have been told that you need to accept the pain. And to you, that may mean that you need to just accept that you're always going to have pain and that it will never change, and that you need to manage your mind and your thoughts around your pain. But that's not exactly what I'm going to be talking about here. I feel like my message is a little more hopeful because if you've been listening to my podcast, you know that I talk about chronic pain as something that we can heal from, especially if it has the characteristics of this neurogenic or neuroplastic pain, TMS, neural circuit disorder, central sensitization, any of those kind of names for the pain that the brain produces that is felt in the body. Research does show, and I do believe it's possible to heal 80 to 90% or 90+% of chronic conditions. So acceptance doesn't mean that you're giving up or resigning. Quite the opposite. I want to talk to you today about how acceptance is going to be the easiest and quickest way for you to actually change and rewire your brain to have less pain. And yes, that does start with accepting where you are, the pain that you have right now. If you've been listening to my podcast for the last few weeks, I've been talking about a lot how our pain is influenced by our thoughts, especially around fear. So when people tend to catastrophize their pain or fear their pain more, they create more pain in their brain. The antidote for that, the opposite of creating that fear and catastrophizing, is to be more mindful. So people who are more mindful actually catastrophize less and create less pain. Last episode, I talked about 3 ways to become more mindful: to become more aware, to become more open, and to become more accepting. And that's the one we're going to really focus on today. I talked about this a little bit more with emotions, and especially the emotion of shame, in episode 42, where I talk about radical self-acceptance. And again, this premise is that the way to truly change, the best way to change, is to really accept all of your humanity, your darkness, and accept without shame who you really are. And that is going to be the true way for you to change into the version of you that you want to become. What we usually do when we notice that we want to be different is we think that we need to be better. And by default, that means something isn't right with us right now. Something's wrong with us. We need to change to be better. And so a lot of times there's a lot of mental beating ourselves up, not being very nice to ourselves, and shame involved with the process of trying to change. So, for example, the diet culture where people try to lose weight and most of the time it's not successful, I think is because people are approaching themselves from this place of not liking where they are, being desperate to change, kind of hating themselves. And you're never going to create a positive result from a negative emotion. Now, it is normal to try to beat ourselves up to change. You know, a lot of times we will think, well, if I'm not hard on myself, if I'm not always pushing myself, then I'll just be lazy and I'll lay on the couch and eat potato chips all day. So there's something in us that really feels like we need to push ourselves and beat ourselves up in order to get to this next place that we want to be. But what I'm offering is that that type of change is more of a struggle and going to be harder to come by than by accepting where we are now. So loving our body where it is now, starting to appreciate the great things that our body does for us. We'll be more likely to treat our body nicely if we're trying to lose weight, coming from a place of already loving our body, or at least liking it somewhat, or at least a neutral place of our body, then if we're coming from a place of hating our body, not wanting to look like this anymore, being desperate to change, when we can have appreciation and gratitude and acceptance for our body, then we might not want to eat 12 donuts because it actually doesn't feel good to overeat and to be uncomfortable that way. We just treat ourselves differently if we're coming from a place of acceptance for ourselves. If you see this pattern with yourself, that you've been beating yourself up, maybe you've been a perfectionist, maybe you're a high achiever, and again, maybe you have that belief that if you don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, then you'll do absolutely nothing. Don't worry. It's gotten you this far. Nothing has gone wrong. You don't need to beat yourself up for beating yourself up. At this point, I want you to just start to notice these tendencies that you might have to be very harsh on yourself, and know that this is not helpful in creating the result that you want if you want to really change your life. I promise you, you can still move to evolve to a new version of yourself, to a better place, coming from a place of already accepting and loving yourself. So look for those times that you're harsh on yourself or use shame with yourself if you have a harsh inner critic. And look for ways that you can start to become more accepting of your thoughts, your emotions, and the ways that you react. We actually talk a lot about accepting our emotions and not repressing them when we're talking about chronic pain. Sometimes people are taught that certain emotions are not okay to feel. It means you're weak, or it means that you have a bad temper, or something's wrong with you. You're not controlling yourself. So if you are judging your emotions very harshly, you can look at that. It's normal that we don't want to be uncomfortable. We want to get out of that discomfort. But realizing that part of the time in humanity, we are going to have some things that are uncomfortable. We're not going to be happy all of the time. And that's okay. It's okay for us to sometimes feel shame, sometimes feel anger, sometimes feel embarrassment or rejection. If we were happy all the time, then we wouldn't even know what happy is. It would just be normal. So the range of human emotions are normal. The trick is to accept and move through the emotions that we have and not get stuck in them or amplify and react to them in ways that we don't want to. But emotions themselves are normal. It's not a sign that you are doing things wrong if you have a range of emotions. If you are someone that has a hard time feeling emotions, or you know that you repress some emotions because you have some negative ideas about them, like it's bad to be angry, then journaling, I think, is a great way for you to start to express your emotions in a safe way. And again, the more accepting you are of yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, then you have a place where you can make and create some meaningful change. And as we know, emotions and pain are closely related. So the same thing applies to accepting your pain. The way that you will change your pain the quickest, the easiest, is to actually accept the pain that you have. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you're accepting that you're going to have pain your whole life. That's definitely not what I'm talking about. Being mindful is about the present moment. It's not talking about what's going to happen in the future or your whole life. That's a form of catastrophizing. What I'm talking about here is accepting in the moment what's going on for you. And when you meet the sensations in your body with more acceptance, your brain gets the signal that this is not important, it's not life or death, and it doesn't need to be hypervigilant about the pain, and it doesn't need to keep creating the pain, which is what happens when you have a lot of reaction and fear. Reacting to pain with neutrality or a sense of safety is the number one way to rewire your brain to produce less pain. So acceptance with the pain signals, with the sensations, the vibrations in your body that you're having is the place to start. And even in research, we see that people who are more accepting of their pain have better social, emotional, and physical functioning, less medication consumption, and better work status. Most of the time, when we have something uncomfortable in our body, we will have resistance to it. We don't like it. We don't want to feel it. And you know the equation I reference a lot, pain times resistance equals suffering. I think of acceptance and resistance as opposites. So when we act with resistance or fear, we tend to amplify the pain. And reacting with acceptance is the way that we can rewire the brain. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I realize, especially if you've had chronic pain and you've tried everything, that this might sound like a very frustrating thing to hear, that you have to accept the pain, that you have to go into it. But resisting it is not helping. In fact, we know that resisting will cause more pain. So, step one in accepting your pain is not blaming yourself for the pain. Sometimes when you start to learn about this work and maybe repressed emotions or some of the personality traits that you have, or even knowing some of this knowledge, and then your pain flares up again, you might tend to blame yourself, like, I should know better, I've caused this myself. Those types of thoughts are not helpful. Try to notice if you're blaming yourself and be so compassionate with yourself here. The second way to more acceptance is not catastrophizing the pain. Those are things like thinking, it always hurts. I'm never going to get out of pain. I can't do anything to control it. I have a whole episode about catastrophizing, and I think it's very helpful if you can review the list of the types of phrases that are catastrophizing and notice when you do them. Again, here you're noticing, you're being curious with yourself, so compassionate with yourself, not judging yourself. And the third step is to get to more of a neutral place. And there are a lot of different options of what you can do here. You may choose something different from day to day, depending on how you're feeling. I would get good at developing a repertoire of things that help you feel more neutral when you have the sensation of pain. At sometimes it may be going into the pain. So something like a somatic tracking meditation where you're describing the pain neutrally, or you could totally ignore the pain and do something else, especially if you're able to find something that distracts you, like something that's funny or a way that you're able to connect with someone. Sometimes those things can be a really great way to completely ignore the pain and not go into it at all. Anything you can do to calm your nervous system can be helpful. So whether that's taking a nap or doing some exercise or going outside or petting a dog, again, learning which of these things for you work best and have some go-tos, some strategies that you can employ when you're feeling that sensation. Sometimes it is helpful for people to work on understanding what it is that's creating their pain, like a certain emotion or a thought pattern they might be thinking. But I've also seen that work against people. So be on to yourself if you notice that you are really anxious about figuring out what it is, almost panicked that you can't figure out what you're thinking or feeling. And in those cases, it's not as important to identify the exact thought or feeling, but just to calm yourself, to get to more of a neutral state. Remember, when you react calmly, you rewire your brain to create less pain. So notice this week where you can become more accepting of the thoughts and feelings and sensations you have in your body. All right, have a great week. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned a little bit about your brain today that helps you in your life like it helped me. Please be sure and subscribe and leave a review. And of course, be sure and share this podcast with someone you know that wants an unstoppable body and mind.